So, good morning, everyone. My name is Leonardo Piccinetti. I'm the Managing Director of Euro for Business, which is a partner company of the Recopharma project, which is an Horizon 2020 project in the Marie Curie Action, Research and Innovation Staff Exchange Program. And today we are organizing the first innovative approach of the webinars related to the science policy interface. And we are very delighted to have two partners from the team from Recopharma, the project manager Gustavo Perez, the project manager from the University Autónoma of Barcelona, and also our two colleagues from University of Udine in Italy, Professor Melchior and Professor Tolazzi. And of course, the guest speaker, which is NHS from UK, will be extremely interesting to give an overview of the synergies and the collaboration with the Recopharma project. The agenda of today is to breaking up the session is to introduce the speakers, and in particular to see the capacity and the capability and the skill that we can work together in the future. I'll also leave the floor to Gustavo to give a very short overview of the Recopharma, and then with the NHS case studies, which is very fascinating to listen from Sharon, will be extremely interesting to make an opportunity. Later on, the collaboration with the University of Udine give us an update of the information what we are doing in the next ESOF, and to see potential discussion with all the partners of the way forward for potential collaboration. So I would like to join and to welcome to everyone. So good morning, everyone. So I will leave, first of all, the introduction to Sharon. Just yourself, just introduce yourself, and then I'll pass to Gustavo and to Andrea and Professor Tolazzi as well.
Thank you, Leonardo. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Pfleger. I'm a consultant in pharmaceutical public health with the NHS, the National Health Service in Scotland, based in Inverness, up in the Highlands.
Gustavo?
Okay, this is Gustavo Perez, project manager at Autonomous University of Barcelona, PhD in chemistry, working as a project manager of a Recopharma project.
Very good, Gustavo. Let's go to Italy, to Andrea and Professor Tolazzi. I think, Andrea, we have a problem to your mic.
Non si sente, Andrea.
Yeah. Yes, Andrea, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I'm professor of chemistry at the Faculty of Engineering of the University of Udine. I'm a participant in Recopharma and doing mostly basic science, and well, that's it.
Okay, and also we have a last-minute intervention also from Professor Tolazzi.
Yes, very quickly, I'm Marilena Tolazzi. I'm professor of chemistry at the University of Udine in the Faculty of Engineering, and I'm working in collaboration with Andrea Melchior for this project of Recopharma. Thank you, and bye to all of you.
Thank you very much. And also my colleague Leslie Tobin, which is join us also from a dissemination activity from EFB, is also join us. Leslie, are you there?
Yeah, hi, I'm Leslie Tobin. I'm also based in Scotland, and I'm supporting the Dissemination Communications Work Package for Leonardo with EFB for Recopharma.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Leslie. So I leave the floor to Gustavo. I will be close my mic in order to give a very short overview about the Recopharma, and then we can carry on our plan agenda.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to try to share with you this brief project summary about Recopharma. So Recopharma is a pool of partners. We have the public side with the Autonomous University of Barcelona, Lund University, Po University, and the University of Udine. That is complemented with the private sector, in that case an engineering company that's called Iris, dealing with the scale of a pilot plant, and Europe for Business, our partner dealing with the dissemination and communication. And the special side is that we have a cooperation with Cuban institutions. On one side, we have the University of Havana, working on non-structured materials and analytical chemistry. And then we have a private sector partner that's CIDEM, is the Center for the Development of Drugs. So this is a pool of partners that complements itself with a series of backgrounds differentiated, and this partnership is addressing one problem that is occurring so far right now in Europe. It's about the occurrence of cytostatic drugs at different levels, and we have different approaches. It could be the approach from the hospital source or from the pharmaceutical company source. In that case, we are targeting this kind of recalcitrant stable compounds because it's not really well understood which is the pathway to the environment, because at the end they are not fully degraded and they can remain on the water effluents after the wastewater treatments. So with considering all the existing treatments, we are describing adsorption, MBR, ozonation, nanofiltration, electrochemical oxidation. We have realized that we have potential drawbacks in terms of sneak outs or byproducts or the discharge of concentrates. So with this picture in mind, we decided to generate the Recopharma project, trying to provide a solution based on the implementation of nanostructured supported materials and molecular imprinted polymers to develop a thermoregulated adsorption-desorption system complemented with the advanced oxidation process, addressing this water effluence. So at the end, what do we expect as a result of this project is the implementation of all this research, innovative research, into a pilot plant to be demonstrated at the facilities of cytostatic drugs producers, complemented by the mobility and exchange of knowledge of all the involved partners, the outreach of the outputs of these activities through workshops of Science Cafe, and the implementation of interactions with other institutions working in the same research fields. So we have started to gather some lessons that we are learning in terms of the importance of integrating a multidisciplinary value chain of experts, that there is still the need to understand which are the main changes that are suffering the cytostatics, and maybe we should target not only these products, but also the metabolites excreted by the humans treated with these compounds. And that is still so far the need of gathering new knowledge in different aspects on the value chain of our project, not only at the analytical level, detecting these compounds or the metabolites, but also improving the adsorption materials at different levels, and how to effectively implement them to develop the new generation of adsorbents, and as well try to implement them as environmental efficiently as possible, and integrate them in a real demonstration for end users to check the feasibility of the proposed solution. So at the end, we have realized that there are different options that could be the field to develop new links with other ongoing initiatives, trying to exploit the results or trying to establish new synergies. So we try to characterize or summarize them within this table at the level of new materials to be developed, new quality controls at the analytical level, new thermodynamic approaches, or pilot plans to be tested in in other sectors or directly on hospitals treating with some targeted pollutants. So we can expect that is the case of what we suggest for Cuba, but we can easily translate to other regions in Europe in terms of establish bilateral cooperation, extend the existing network, join bilateral programs, increase the performance not only of the public but also the private sector, and improve the skills of the involved individuals and accelerate the progress on the key areas of water treatment of these target pollutants. And I would say that's all from my side.
Well, thank you very much, Gustavo. It was a very concise, a very clear presentation to provide, especially to our guest speaker from Scotland, how we are currently working. So we are already past the middle of the project. So we are now have some results in terms of research, but of course case studies and stakeholders engagement is also an interesting point for this kind of project. Thank you very much, Gustavo. So Sharon, give us an overview about what could be an interesting point in terms of who you are, what kind of activity you are currently doing in Scotland, but also at European level, and what kind of lessons that you learned from your experience that you've been working now in your portfolio between pharmaceutical and environment. It would be extremely interesting from you, this kind of activity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leonardo. I will just share my presentation here with you. See if I can get it to go back. Okay, so I'm really here today on behalf of the One Health Breakthrough Partnership, which has been formed in the Highlands of Scotland. I might just add to begin with that I am a consultant in pharmaceutical public health, and that means that I'm registered as a pharmacist and also registered as a public health clinician. And the NHS, the National Health Service, is a publicly funded health service in the UK. NHS Highland, well, Scotland in itself has about 5.5 million of a population, and NHS Highland has only about 330,000 people living across an area that is as big as Belgium. So we're a very remote and rural health board, one of 14 in Scotland. So the One Health Breakthrough Partnership was formed about 3 years ago. We held an international roundtable conference in 2017, and we had lots of partners that you can see on this slide around the table. We tackled the issue of aquatic pollutants, emerging pollutants, and pharmaceuticals. And at the end of the day, we were asked to prioritise what we wanted to work on. And our water utility, Scottish Water, and our Environment Protection Agency, SEPA, came up with the issue that pharmaceuticals in the water was actually a priority for them, but they couldn't do much about it at the time because you need new technology, you need infrastructure, etc. So they were very interested to understand what the NHS could do upstream, as it were, to try and stop the pharmaceuticals getting into the water. So as a result, we formed the One Health Breakthrough Partnership, and the top of the slide there, they are the 5 main partners. So we have the University of the Highlands and Islands, which itself encompasses the Environmental Research Institute, which is led by Professor Stuart Gibb. We have the Highlands and Islands Enterprise, which is our social enterprise body in the Highlands, with the HIE tries to develop businesses, make sure that economic viability, sustainability is key. We have Scottish Water, as I've mentioned, SEPA, and the NHS. We also work on board with many other partners, many other universities. So far we've got Edinburgh University, Glasgow, Strathclyde, Glasgow Caledonian, and the James Hutton Institute involved in some of our work. And we work with the Healthcare Without Harm NGO, which is based in Brussels, And also we bring private companies in. So we've done some work with Talking Medicines to develop a video, which I'll tell you about soon. So the last 3 years has really been trying to get this partnership together. We are, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4 public bodies there. We're all funded by the government, but we all work in our own silos. We don't share data, we don't share resource. So it's been a challenge to get the 4 public bodies to actually come together. We've all got the same vision. The vision that we have is for a non-toxic Highland, and we thought that the priority for a non-toxic Highland, and because we rely incredibly on our water resources, both for tourism, we're a huge tourist attraction in the Highlands. We have skiing, water activities, lots of lochs to go canoeing, swimming in, etc. But we also have a huge economic reliance on water in our food and drink production. You may have heard that we're quite famous for our whiskey production, so that relies completely on water. So really important to us that we have clean water for our population and for our sustainable economic environment. So we came together with priority of pharmaceuticals in the water. And this issue of pharmaceutical pollution is not going to go away. You probably know that the prescription of a medicine is the most common intervention that we have in healthcare. So we use pharmaceuticals to diagnose, to cure, to treat, and to prevent disease. And across the world, we're currently using about $1.2 trillion worth of pharmaceuticals every year. In Scotland, we're sitting at about 1.8 billion. And in NHS Highland, for our population of 300,000 people, we're now using about £100 million a year. And of course, the use of pharmaceuticals is increasing across the world because new drugs are being delivered to us, new technologies. We have an elderly population, aging population, we have more people, we have a pill for every ill culture. So lots of things that are actually driving the use of pharmaceuticals. So there's a lot that the NHS can do here. What we've been involved with so far, and I would say that my colleague Alan Whiteside, who is a self-employed consultant in innovation to the NHS in Highland, knows a lot more about this than I do. So I'm sure he can give you lots more information, and I can put you in touch with him about this. But just some of the things that we've been involved with, just a handful so far, at international and European level. We are involved with the Alliance for Water Stewardship, and I'll tell you a bit more about that later on in the presentation. Obviously working with Leonardo and his colleagues across Europe on the aquatic pollutants call right now, which was just submitted yesterday. Another program that we work with is with Stuart Gibb in ERI in the Northern Periphery and Arctic. So we've had a few projects be submitted for that. Our work kicked off in the NHS working with Stockholm City Council in Sweden, looking at their WISE list. So about 15 years ago, they started looking at the environmental impact of the medicines that they use. And they are now recommending medicines based on environmental impact as one of the issues that they consider. So we had a fact-finding mission to Stockholm to work with them. And we're now trying to implement the same type of work in Highland. Contributing to the EU Commission on the pharmaceuticals consultation that they had last year, and obviously working quite closely with Healthcare Without Harm. I've spoken in Brussels at their Pharmaceuticals and the Environment Day, and they've worked with us on the conference that we've held, etc. So still maintaining close links with them. Nationally in Scotland, we are working with CREW. CREW is a government-funded Centre for Expertise in Water, which looks at research into all aspects of water. So we've got a couple of research bids with them. The most important that we're working on is a baseline compilation of pharmaceuticals in the water in Scotland, and that's due to report in about September this year, hopefully. through the government and through CREW as well, we've sponsored, and I'm part of the steering group for a few hydronation PhDs. And that's anything from looking at pharmaceuticals in hospital water in our rural situation, to developing nanotechnologies to remove pharma at source in our hospital, to thinking about how else we could prevent the use of pharmaceuticals through blue-green healthcare, working with water and nature to improve people's health. We've also been doing quite a lot of marketing, as it were, in Scotland and in the Highlands, and we've caught the attention of the media. So we did a BBC Brainwaves programme at the start of the year, and we've also done an USCA News. If you've heard of USCA News, they do webinars quite like we're doing here today across the world. And we talked about our Alliance for Water Stewardship project there. And we've also been nominated for a few awards nationally in Scotland and in the UK. Last year we were a finalist in the Vibes Awards, which is a business and environmental and sustainability award across Scotland for our partnership approach to dealing with an issue for the environment. And this year we have been nominated as a finalist in the British Medical Journal Awards for Healthcare Awards. They were meant to take place in April, but they have been postponed due to COVID because medical colleagues are pretty busy with COVID at the minute. So hopefully they'll take place later in the year. Locally in the Highlands, in our project, we're trying to take a life cycle approach to this. So everything from green pharmacy, green chemistry in the development of pharmaceuticals, right through to the waste that people throw in their bins or put down their toilets after they've finished with their pharmaceuticals. As I said before, we're trying to work upstream, so actually trying to prevent the pollution of water or to reduce the impact of pharmaceuticals in our wastewater treatment system. We've been trying to build up a network of clinicians because when I started this work, clinicians didn't know anything about pharmaceuticals in the environment. They're obviously involved with knowing what the pharmaceuticals do to human beings and involved with prescribing them. But after that, what happens down the line, what happens when it's excreted from the human being's body that they actually prescribed it to, wasn't on their radar. So I've had a lot of interest in this subject since I've started speaking to clinicians across Scotland and the rest of the UK and wider actually. And I'm trying to build up a network of clinicians in Scotland and particularly in Highland so that we can start projects, for instance, on inhalers, on antidepressants, etc. The work that we're most interested in and that the government is supporting us on is greening our formulary. A formulary is a list of medicines that we narrow down for our clinicians to prescribe from. So across Europe, we have between 3,000 and 4,000 APIs or medicines, and we want to narrow those down based on clinical effectiveness and cost effectiveness, and we do that in something called our formulary. We have one of those in every health board across Scotland, but we're also trying to work towards a single national formulary in Scotland. So the work that we're doing is really vital because we could inform the prescribing of all our prescribers across Scotland. So we're having early discussions about that, trying to work out, apart from clinical effectiveness and cost effectiveness, how we can bring environmental sustainability and impact into that, thinking about the persistence of drugs, their biodegradability, and work that into our formulary. As I said, we've done the Alliance for Water Stewardship. We're also running a waste pharma campaign in our community pharmacies and in our population. Sadly, that's had to come to a halt in the middle of COVID because of the pressure put on our community pharmacies with dispensing. I've mentioned the National Formulary, but we're also looking at Scottish Medicines Consortium, which is, I guess, a tartan version of NICE, some people refer to it as. It's our health technology appraisal body in Scotland, and so far pharmaceutical companies don't submit environmental risk assessment information when they put a health technology appraisal into SMC, and we would like to see that change. So having really very early discussions with SMC. Also working with our antimicrobial teams on the prudent use of antimicrobials. There's lots of scope from the clinicians that I've been working from, our oncologists, again, working with the cytostatic drugs and some of our controlled drugs like you're working with in the Recopharma project, our antimicrobial specialists working with antibiotics and antivirals, very interested. Our mental health team working with antidepressants, all very interested in what they can do in this agenda. So if I tell you a little bit more detail about the Alliance for Water Stewardship, AWS is an international charity. It is based in Scotland, down near the borders of Scotland, and it's a global network that basically tries to promote responsible use of fresh water with a social, economic and environmental focus. Because none of us own the water that we use, so we've got to be socially responsible in our use of that water. And whilst healthcare, our raison d'etre is actually to improve the health of our population, healthcare is actually a huge polluter of our environment as well, and much of that pollution comes from the use of pharmaceuticals. So in NHS Highland, we decided that we wanted to do something about this, and we have undertaken the Alliance for Water Stewardship standard work. We have looked at the sections that they've got in that and made sure that we have identified gaps in our water stewardship. And one of those gaps was in pharmaceuticals. We were really thrilled to become the first site in the UK, but even more so, the first hospital in the world to have achieved the standard back at the start of the year. So we hope through working with the Alliance for Water Stewardship that we are going to enhance our water quality. We're going to end up reducing our environmental impact of healthcare. We will reduce our pharmaceutical wastage with the messages that we're putting out to our clinicians and also the public. And circuitously, we will hopefully reduce our costs as well in dealing with our wastewater and in the drugs that we prescribe. And this has been a real partnership initiative with Scottish Water, SEPA, ERI and NHS Highland, to name just a few. So through our work, we've actually discovered that what we're trying to do is a really wicked problem. So no one organisation, no one country in the world can actually solve this on our own. Excuse me. It really does need genuine partnership and collaborative working. It takes time, it's a long-term initiative, and we do need innovation in this space. So that's why I'm particularly interested in working with Recopharma on this issue. That we really do need to work upstream because it will cost billions and billions of pounds across the UK, across Scotland and across the world to actually get technology into our wastewater treatment plants. So the best thing we can do is actually work upstream to remove pharma at source, or to stop using as much or stop using as harmful pharma. So what we're trying to do with the One Health Breakthrough Partnership is actually to provide leadership in this sphere in Scotland and with our partners across the world, and trying to make sure that the evidence that has been around for 20 or 30 years, we actually start to make a real impact with it. We have had some challenges in working in this partnership. We have all benefited in this journey because we have created cross-partner learning that we would never have had if we hadn't been working together. But we do all have a common goal, but we can all bring something different to the table. There are obviously challenges in funding a partnership like this. We're all trying to do the day job, so we do need coordination to help us with this. Some of the challenges we have are that some of this stuff isn't actually within our jurisdiction. It's at government level, at policy level. So we're trying to work with the policymakers to actually get them to realise that this is something that we have to do in future. We haven't been sharing data sources. We all have our own data, our own policies, our own way of working in these public organizations. But we are now, we have got a data sharing agreement, which has taken over 6 months to get into up and running, really. There are uncertainties across the organizations with what we can commit to. There are sensitivities, obviously, around this agenda. We're trying to manage expectations across partners. But really, it has been very fruitful, and we're really excited because every day now we hear more about pharmaceuticals in the environment. And this is a real perfect storm at the minute, I think, because we have things like the aquatic pollutants call, we have the OECD report out in November, we have the new EU Commission come in at the end of last year, and we're learning more about really exciting projects like yours across the world and being invited to be part of them. So really, to finish up with, we are working along the life cycle of pharmaceuticals. So the partnership and NHS Highland that I represent is interested in collaborating right along that life cycle, whether it's, as I say, from green pharmacy or right along to the end user, to the patient, and to the waste in the life cycle of pharmaceuticals. So that's just been a really quick introduction. I could share some more, and I've probably forgotten lots more, but please do ask me any questions.
Well, thank you very much. It was very fascinating, very interesting presentation. You tackled many things that we can be discussing now with our colleagues. But before, I would like to also leave the floor to Andrea just to give an overview as another partner from Recopharma, from the chemistry faculty. Also, this is an interesting region, which is I know very well as an Italian, in Friuli, Venezia Giulia, of course, with the collaboration with stakeholder. You mentioned cluster, you mentioned partnership, which is extremely important to create collaboration between different regions. So Andrea, would like to just to give a very short overview about your research activities, maybe you and your colleagues, and in particular, what you think in view what is being listened from Sharon to discuss, and then we can go to the open debate.
Well, I don't have a presentation, so I just
just introduce yourself. Just introduce yourself and to do what you're currently doing.
I told you I'm a chemistry professor. I work at engineering faculty. So actually, officially, I'm a professor of chemical foundations of technology. So basically, I do mostly basic research on chemical phenomena, which are at the basis of technologies. So they are in principle something that is going to be employed in practical applications. This is the general idea of my activity. In the framework of Recopharma, we are studying, let's say, I don't want to be too technical, but I will studying the thermochemistry at the basis of the removal processes of drugs from water. So we essentially studied interaction between pharmaceutical drugs. We decided to work at quite low concentrations, which are those found in actual samples, and we study how materials that we selected as promising or interesting for or specific for some kind of drugs, how these drugs interact with them. In Recopharma we study mostly platinum compounds, and we studied the cisplatin family of anti-cancer drugs, and how we studied how they are removed by materials, either commercial or semi-commercial, so material which can be purchased and then modified, or brand new materials which have been developed by the University of London, which is another partner with the Professor Layer. It is a, don't want to go in deep, but it's a different philosophy. The commercial materials have so-called chelating arms on their surface, so they can basically capture the platinum metal, so they destroy the compound in this way. While the materials developed by Lund are materials are molecularly imprinted polymers, which are like supposed to be very selective towards a given molecule, because they are just synthesized in presence of the molecule, so they have like inside a fingerprint, which is very specific for a given compound. So the idea developed in Udine is to study this double, these two classes of materials. I told you we studied thermochemistry, so the idea is to measure the heat exchange during the process. So why we do this? We do this because the idea is to capture these compounds from water, accumulate them on a solid phase, and then release them. So we make, basically the idea is to make a pre-concentration process. So we can treat high volumes with low levels pharmaceuticals, accumulate them on a solid phase, and then release them. How to release them? We release them by heating, for example, the solid phase. So we don't need more chemicals to be used to release these compounds to a wastewater, which can be treated with, for example, in Recopharma, there is the idea of using advanced oxidation processes, so using catalysts, and this is a part which is developed more in the UAB. So this is the basic idea of the technology, or the science behind the technology. So this is what we're doing. In our part, there is less focused on the analytical. We are the University of Po is more interested. They are specialists in trace analysis, so they are more interested in the analytical part, and they will. Since in Recopharma, the idea is the scope is to produce a working pilot plan with loaded with these materials, treating some sample. The analytical part is mostly focused on measuring what enters and what comes out, so we know what is degraded by the plant and what comes out, because as Gustavo said, the metabolites can be, or the transformation products can be as harmful as the original compound. So this I would say just a very, very brief summary of all the sense behind the Recopharma idea, which is not only Udine. Udine does a piece of it, Lund does another, and Po and UAB do another part. I guess that Leonardo was also expecting me to tell you about the participation in ESOF.
Well, there are different aspects. Of course, ESOF is one of the aspects I would like to also thanks to Andrea and his team. We made an application before Christmas period to the ESOF. ESOF is the biggest event organizing. There was an event that is come out in the last project meeting, the Recopharma, and we decided to make an application for an ESOF. So ESOF is a good scenarios from around Europe about how the science could be also linked to the communication. Why this? Because we need to remember that Recopharma is not only technology-driven project doing request mobility and a new skill in research and innovation. But this is also important to engage people that are not engaged in technologies. And from us, the concept of Science Cafe, the empowerment of the citizen in the participation is one of the areas, which is we are very fascinated what also you're doing in a community based in Scotland. So the ESO is one of the aspects, but I will put on the table now in order to give some provocative, discussion. What I can see now in terms of collaboration between Recopharma and NHS, I see there is a lot of complementarity in terms of new skills, in terms of a new skill from practitioners, new skill from researchers, a new skill from industries, and also new skill from government. From the government perspective, it's also extremely important to raise these issues so that pharmaceutical pollutant in environment will be extremely important on the agenda. You mentioned the OECD studies, but I would like to also mention to you now, this is the right moment at European level to make noise to a new consultation period of the new EU Green Deal. So the European Commission, they launched a consultation engagement because the new future call in Horizon Europe, there were new call for life or the new call for environment have to be aligned of the new Green Deal. Now, in the new Green Deal, which is launching today, I will share with you also the new aspect, not only specifically for the call for the consultation. There are something where I believe Recopharma, but also NHS, we should working together. On one side, the concept of circular economy, and the other side, the pandemic issues. So how we can combine these two, I would say, implication and policy level that we should do together. You mentioned something which is also an interesting aspect about open data. So open data is a big, big issue at European international level. So the best way is to start with a best practice example, how you made in Scotland to create this partnership, trust. So this collaboration of open portfolio, because a cluster is a definition. So we have an experience that comes from different experience from the partners. But what I want to say in terms of trustability and governance, in particular for the open data sharing, this is a very important. Where is the data is going to be? Who is going to be benefit this? So maybe we can do also some specific session of open data in those topics. Or also the interesting aspect of the business model that you are creating in terms of circularities with the companies. Might be some companies or might be some water organization that work in Scotland. It could be an interesting point to see the collaboration with our partner in Recopharma, specifically Aris project, the partner that we have in terms of wastewater treatment plant. And the international cooperation, this is an interesting scenario. So in view also Scotland and UK about the Brexit, about Europe, but also outside developing countries. The collaboration with Cuba was an interesting point of view to UK have a very strong collaboration in pharmaceutical industries now with Cuba. What I would like to say that I see there is a room of improvement, a room of collaboration that we should see on the table. So I leave the floor to you because I don't want to speak too much because I'm the moderator, but I think it will be an interesting roadmap to create this kind of cluster. So any reaction from the speakers, from any suggestion? That would be an interesting point to see.
Yeah, I can go ahead. I mean, it's impressive the strategy that shared Sharon. I mean, they have more an umbrella perspective. They are aware about the entire system. So we are a small grain there. So we are just approaching one target compound in a small section of the value chain, and with this the approach from the private sector, from the producers. I mean, is I would say it's another perspective. What I would suggest, okay, this is the partnership that you have, how to engage the producers there, because at the end the pharma producers could be a good complementary in terms of all these issues that you have indicated about the sustainability, how to indicate to the pharmaceutical industry that we are interested in more greener products, in more chemical efficient, in more healthy products, to have the ideal partnership dealing with let's say one target series of compounds, because you cannot target all of them. I mean, you should have some framework for different family of compounds when you are trying and replicate the same partnership. I mean, the same structure of the partnership with, okay, the public research, the health system, the environmental agencies, the producers, but let's say different pillars for different families of products, and how to rank them in importance, which is the KPI that you are going to employ to, let's say, rank the importance of the target pharma compounds in terms of, because they are more problems, they cost more, the affectation is higher, they can be replaced easily. Which could be the approach to rank them?
Yeah, right. Thanks, Gustavo. Just to take your last point first, the KPI to rank pharmaceuticals. So far in working with Stockholm City Council, they had 25 pharmaceuticals that they ranked for environmental toxicity. They had a ranking system based on persistence, bioaccumulation, and toxicity. They gave each a score of 3, and the ones with the highest toxicity they focused on. But you're right, we need to think, we're trying to think a bit more widely in Scotland, because we could have high volume prescribing, or we could have high volume prescribing of less toxic ones, but actually overall the environmental impact might be greater than the low volume prescribing of the more toxic ones. So it's really very early days with us, and we're thinking about, so far I think we've identified our antidepressants, our SSRIs, and our non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, our NSAIDs, as 2 pilots that we are going to look retrospectively at our data. And the reason we have chosen, some of the reasons we've chosen those, they're very high volume prescribing drugs. We know that they have got environmental impact. We also know that in the class for each of them, there are substitutes. So say for our anti-inflammatories, we could look at ibuprofen, naproxen, and just gone brain dead on the last one, diclofenac. And whilst there may be little difference in the environmental toxicity of naproxen and ibuprofen and diclofenac, for instance, we do know that it's harder to take some of them out at wastewater treatment plant level. So we would, if we were choosing a drug out of those, we would probably say that our formulary choice, because of the wastewater treatment difficulties, would be naproxen over diclofenac. So we're trying to look back from 10 years worth of data on that and actually see what the change in prescribing has been and try to calculate the reduced impact on the environment. That's just one thing that we're trying to do with our formulary at the minute, and then use that as a case study to just do exactly what you said. Think about what are the most important KPIs, or could we do some sensitivity testing on those KPIs to see what the environmental impact might be. But we certainly haven't got all the experts in Highland. There's just me working part-time as a public health consultant in this. I have prescribing advisors, data analysts, but certainly in terms of analytical chemistry and dosage form design, it's well over 30 years since I've studied that. And thank you, Andrea, for making your explanation so beautifully understandable. I did recall my 30 years experience there. I was able to follow what you were saying. But no, so we're absolutely looking for different partners across the world with the different skills that we need to help us on this.
A very, very interesting point. Is there anyone else who would like to add it on these comment, Andrea?
More than a comment, I have a question, which is, to Sharon, do you distinguish point sources like hospitals and treatment of water coming just to the sewer and conventional water treatment plants? I mean, in your hospital and healthcare system, do you think that hospitals should have like a pre-treatment plant or some treatment device just to remove the high volume of pharmaceuticals that goes from the hospital to the water? Because you mentioned different compounds, which are naproxen and diclofenac, which you use at home mostly.
Yeah.
But are you more concerned about the diffuse release of compounds, or on the release of hospitals or manufacturing plants? I don't know, but I think of hospitals mostly.
Okay.
They release a lot of compounds. Are you concerned in which one of these?
Right. Okay, that's a really good point, Andrea. And we know that in the UK, and probably similarly across the world, 90% of prescribing happens in our communities. So the excretion of compounds is coming out of our residential wastewater system. For our Alliance for Water Stewardship work, we focused on a hospital. And the reason we did that was because for our wastewater pathway there, we have a single input from one loch or one lake in Scotland into our hospital. And then the hospital, again, releases its effluent into one single wastewater treatment plant. So we started off with what we thought was probably a quite simple pathway of that water and ingress of pharmaceuticals and then effluent, etc. But we are interested in other waste, such as residential waste, and also in the Highlands of Scotland and elsewhere across Scotland, not so much as the Highlands, we have what we call septic tanks. So we don't have Scottish water wastewater treatment system to every household in Scotland, because I said our health board area is very remote and very, very rural. We can be tens, if not hundreds of miles away, or we can be on islands around our health board, and not all of those houses have got access to mains water and mains sewage. So we have our septic tanks, and again, the effluent from those isn't treated by normal wastewater systems. It just runs out into the soil, into agriculture. So we're again worried about those. So I had been thinking very recently about our patients who are on chemotherapy and do have septic tanks of their own, actually what we do with the waste from those houses. So to go back to your question, are we thinking about source treatment of pharmaceuticals? That's something that a couple of our PhDs are looking at. So we've got one recent PhD looking at nanotechnology and how to actually maybe think about removing pharmaceuticals before they're let out of the hospital. And I guess one thing that happens in hospital that maybe doesn't happen as much, but is becoming more prevalent in the community, is that we have more toxic drugs, that we have higher doses of, say, things like our last ditch antibiotics, ones that we would never use in the community, of our chemotherapy drugs as well that we would use in our hospitals, that we may not use as much in our community. So it's really important to try and isolate those more toxic drugs, even though they may be at lower volumes than all of the community prescribing. So yeah, we're really interested in moving them at hospital level, thinking about whether it could be at effluent level, or thinking about our new architecture, whether we could employ new toilet systems to actually segregate the urine from patients so that it doesn't go into the wastewater from other parts of the hospital, but also thinking about architecture generally in our residences and in our septic tanks.
Okay.
This is a very interesting point to just come to the end of our interesting talk. I believe we, Sharon, as we be definitely be in touch, and of course with the Recopharma collaboration will be an interesting point to share in these activities. What I would like to say that the interesting point is the best practice identification that will be a very important. You mentioned about the hospital supply chain, which is a smart hospital, is on the top of the agenda. So just to remind you, you know, there is an implication now for artificial intelligence, even including the circular economy aspect, Internet of Things, sensor detection will be also could be an interesting point. Specifically, one I find a very interesting point is to identify new skill, especially for the new PhD, especially for this Marie Curie action, but in particular relation between skill adaptation to policymakers and regulation. Now, in our activity, we are going to conduct in Brussels next year and a workshop about regulation implication. And that will be an interesting point to see from different scenarios. We discussing about environmental verification technologies. We of the implication of the directive, of the implication of the bottleneck is not come from technologies, but also from the regulation point of view. So definitely is one of the aspects we should consider in this. So I would like to close here for the moment. I believe there will be continuity process for channeling the information. There will be also, of course, communication between us as a Recopharma, not as a EFB, but as a Recopharma in this process, in order to identify, we call a skill matrix, that we can do an MYU and a collaboration jointly with NHS as a regions, but of course, if we are adapting in the other regions in Europe, internationally, will be extremely important, because by the end of the day, the important is to work, as we can see now from the pandemic point of view, we need to work united. So we need to work in this case that we are facing the implication of the environmental pollution in those topics. So I would like to leave the remarks to Gustavo before to close the session as an overview. And I really enjoyed today this meeting, and I'm sure that there will be also an interesting collaboration in the future with the Recopharma. Gustavo?
Okay, I want to thank Sharon for giving us the chance to know their approach, the possibilities for future interactions, to understand that we are part of we are a small part of a big problem, and we are trying to provide different solutions. We have just started to think about how to address this remote population issue with the septic tanks, because we could, let's say, in some way, discuss with our Swedish colleagues about these sol gel formulations to include as a cartridge for filtration there. I mean, there are a lot of possibilities for brainstorming and address different problems. This is the possibility to start thinking about them and to understand how to replicate your approach in other regions of Europe, because I mean, it's at the end of the day is to understand which other people is doing, and what you have discussing. For sure, this is something that we realized when we were drafting the proposal about the existing architecture at the hospital. You cannot change, so especially in the middle of the cities. So you have to approach in another way, but it's as a result of ongoing practices, it's a good lesson to translate. Okay, for future hospitals, try to segregate them and try to approach if you have more efficient water treatments through this, let's say, some kind of modularity or flexible solutions to deal with different effluents. If you have real-time sensing, able to indicate you which is the charge of your effluent at that moment, and you can switch the treatment through a modular system. So there are possibilities for sure to develop in the coming future. The Recopharma partnership will be delighted to participate on the development of these future possibilities.
Thank you very much, Gustavo. So thank you to everyone for your participation. So we put the videos on the Recopharma. We are sharing this information because this is an interesting point to make more opportunities, not only in this moment, but also because we believe this is an interesting project that need to engage more partners outside also the consortium. Thank you again, and have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.